Okay, if everyone could please be seated. Good evening, everyone. It is April 13th, and I'd like to call the special Finance Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilwoman Marino, Councilman Donegan, Councilman Campiano,
Present.
Councilman Riley,
Present.
Councilwoman Renzulli, Council Vice President Ferry,
Present.
Council President Paplaskas.
Here.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, as we continue our budget hearings, first on the list is the Fire Department and Fire Alarm. Chief Warren, we welcome you here, and what we're basically looking for is an explanation of what it is that you guys do, and if you could introduce your budget to us, and then we would subsequently maybe have a few questions for you. So we welcome you and thank you for being here.
So fire department has 196 firefighters, 13 civilians. We do fire suppression, EMS. We have 2 Marine boats that are in full-time all year long. We have the regional hazmat team for this part of the state. We have fire prevention, which investigates fires. We also have a program where we install smoke detectors and CO detectors in homes for free. We have the fire alarm dispatchers, which takes all calls from 911. We also have the Metro Control Dispatching for all of the metro area and for Narragansett Bay Task Force. So we send boats out all through the state. We also have a line crew which handles 25 traffic lights and all of the solar powered speed reduction flashing signs. So our budget pretty much is the same from the year before. There's not much change in it. We pretty much level funded everything. Other than in the fire alarm division, we did ask for more money for traffic signals.
Do me a favor, push the microphone a little closer. This is towards you, because it does get, this is recorded on, for people that are on Zoom and YouTube anyways. Okay, does anyone on the panel have any questions for the chief? Council President Paplaskas.
Thank you, Vice President Ferry. First of all, welcome, Chief. Thank you so much. Just want to thank the men and women of your department. First off, for the first time ever, a month ago, I had to call a rescue, and you guys were there quickly, responsive, and certainly appreciate it. Got a couple questions. First question will be, what kind of equipment are you buying this year? What are your plans for fire trucks or rescues? And are we paying for that out of the capital budget, or are we going to use that out of operating expenses?
So we buy a rescue a year usually. This year, we're doing a little differently. We're buying 2 for the price of 1. So we're taking a rescue, we're taking the box off the rescue and putting a new cabin chassis. So basically, we're getting 2 rescues, which one was just delivered. It should be in service Friday in Garden City. They took the other truck down to Houston, Texas, and they are doing the same thing. That should be back by June 30th. And that'll be put in service at Station 3 as Rescue 5. So, but we do have another $300,000 for a new rescue for next year.
And that's going to come out of the operating budget.
That comes out of our operating budget.
Obviously, you know that we have a tough financial times. We're looking at a really tough budget. That rescue, is that a necessity to buy?
Yes, we go through rescues. They get used constantly. They're very busy. So they do get beat up, I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
Reserves are very old.
Okay. How has the situation been with responding to other cities and towns? I know in the years past, it got really bad, then it seemed to get better. How are we looking now with?
I would say this year it's probably, it's up there again. We do respond to a lot of cities, mutual aid. We do Providence, Warwick, and East Providence, Johnston.
Do we get reimbursed for some of that work
We
or?
do medical billing through those, yes.
Okay. All right. Chairman, that's all I have for now. I'll defer to my colleagues and we'll circle back if I have any more. Thank you.
Councilman Donegan.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Chief. Appreciate everything you and the department do. Couple questions. The first, overtime. It's already exceeded 100% of fiscal '22. Just wondering, and I know it's going up about $700,000 for next year. Just some insight into why it's running so high this year.
Some of it is COVID. So you look at the second line, 190, 237 is overtime, a lot of it's COVID. So we're down a lot of people through a lot of different reasons, IODs, injuries, sickness, a lot of FLMA has been a problem. But one of our things is that all four of our shifts basically average 44 firefighters per shift. Our minimum manning is 41. So all it takes is 4 firefighters to be out for the vacation. That causes overtime. So that's one of our problems. I know some places like Warwick has floaters, which would help in that capacity. You have 46 firefighters on a shift. You at least have a little more flexibility with our manpower. Nothing at this time. No.
Sorry, I know I've got to speak into this. I apologize. You had mentioned the fire alarm, under the fire alarm budget, the traffic signal repairs,
Yes.
that's going up from 25,000 to 85,000.
So we have to replace a traffic light at Wellington and Park Avenue. It doesn't meet federal guidelines. We're estimating $40,000 to do that.
Does anyone else have any questions? Councilwoman Jermaine.
Thank you. Good, doing well.
You need to put the microphone as close to you as possible.
Again, good evening, Chief. Thank you for the work you've been doing with your staff. And we can attest during the pandemic how crucial, the work you're doing with the staff. Thank you. And thank you to all the staff. I have a question line 53014.
Yep.
Homeland Security expense. 15,000. Would you please give us a little explanation?
Sure,
about-
that's for our generators. If we sign contracts, have our generators for all 6 fire stations. And we do have done some work using the generator account for at the schools because we use them for emergency shelters.
But that has to do with Homeland Security expense?
That's the line item. That's what they gave the, I guess the title for it. I don't know. That's-
So when I see that, it's
I
like
know.
automatically what comes to mind is Homeland Security for what it is. So,
It's basically, if we have a storm or any kind of activity that we can use money from that account.
is that we lead to FEMA, those kind of things, no?
That one is not FEMA. No, we don't get money. We don't put it in there for FEMA. Well, revenue we do. That'd be on revenue. That would be under federal state grants under revenues. It's not on, it's offsetting for that now.
Okay. All right, I have one more question. Is the line item, the next 53016 laundry?
Yes, so that, we do have a laundry service for the stations. They get towels to clean the stations, which came in really handy. Rags to clean. So during COVID, we always wiping down the trucks, wiping down the station to try to keep the station clean. And that's kind of we're supposed to have it by NFPA, is have some kind of cleaning device in the station. So that's what we use, laundry from Falvey.
Okay, it's just towel, it's not, I know we have already a budget for uniform, all of those things.
No, that's different.
It's just
separate.
towels, things.
Towels, sheets, yeah, for some of the beds.
Okay.
Stay overnight.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Donegan?
Thank you. Sorry, Chief. Line item, it's under revenue. It's the federal and state grants. I noticed for the proposed budget down by about 50.5%. So wondering just why that's going down. And also for what was budgeted for last year, it's running at like 33%. And just, do we anticipate getting anything else?
No, so last year we anticipated getting the SAFER grant, which is where we draw that money out of, and we get reimbursed on the revenue side. We didn't get the grant last year. Again, we're trying for a SAFER grant this year. We're trying for a new ladder truck. And we also have a grant for hose and nozzles out for all our trucks. And we also have a grant for fire prevention, for training. So it won't be as expensive. The revenue won't be as the same. It won't be as much this year. The money that we're anticipating to spend or get the revenue in return.
Council President Paplaskas?
Thank you. Just to follow up on Councilmember Donegan's question. Obviously, we didn't get the SAFER grant last year. We had a class. When will you know if we will get the grant this year? And will you wait to see, or do we have to have the class before? Because
No, we have to wait until we get the okay from the federal government. It should be late June, early July. We'll find out.
okay, if we don't get the grant, do you still plan on going forward with the
I
class?
would like to still have a class of 12, yes.
Okay, and how many members are you down right now?
We're only down, we'll be down 8 by July 1st.
Okay, and I guess that'll segue, Mr. Chairman, if I can have the floor for a minute. The next question is longevity. Line item 51106, that's up. Could you explain a little bit on why that has increased?
That's contractual.
It is, Councilman, it's contractual, and it also is based on the complement of the fire department. So you don't start receiving it until your 4th year as a firefighter. And as these classes of 12 or 15 move up, each year you get more and more people coming on. But you also, conversely, have people falling off as they retire.
Okay, excellent. My next question, Chief, which station's the busiest?
Station 3,
Station 3?
Cranston and Dyer.
Kind of always has been since, I know I've told some of the members of your audience before, I used to live right off Cranston Street. And when the trucks would go by, my house would shake. And that was
Yeah,
about,
they go out
20
a lot,
times a
they're quite
day.
busy. It is a busy truck.
all right. Well, I guess that's good to hear that it's still busy. I know there's a part-time rescue that runs out of there. How's that been going?
That's also very busy. So that runs 10 hours during the day, 8 to 6. It's a very busy truck. And it is a feeder. It goes everywhere. So they go the western end a lot with that rescues out. So it's very busy. And to Garden City quite often.
Now, I know when that was put into service, I remember we discussed about the healthcare billings to kind of cover the cost of that truck. Is that still the case?
We believe it does. Yeah, we
Okay.
believe it does cover.
Okay.
It's close.
And then my last question is rental of hydrants. I see that's up.
Yep.
Do
Yeah,
you want to give an explanation on that for?
So that's always a tough one. We have no choice on that one. Providence Water seems to get us every year
Okay,
for rental hydrants.
we can't tell them if we cancel, we'll go somewhere else
I
and
would love
like,
to.
like you do with the cable bill and they'll reduce it. No?
It's very difficult. Yeah, they're not easiest to work with.
Okay, well, hopefully if they're going up on everybody, they're doing that on everyone in the state that they do that with.
No,
So,
they do. They hit everybody.
okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Order to DeMayo.
Chief Warren, first I
Yes.
want to thank you in the department. I also had a personal issue last year and the guys were great. I just have a quick question. You had alluded to the third-party rescue Medicaid. And in the current budget, reimbursements are at about 32%, which is low. And in the current budget, your level funding it is $1 million. Is that a timing issue on reimbursements or is it substantially low?
That isn't the rescue. It's the line below it that is the actual rescue. That line item represents the billing that we do for Cranston residents. And there's an offsetting expense for the same amount. That's just something that we're required to record per Medicaid guidelines. but it's offsetting. There's an expense and a revenue.
So basically, it's a flat line?
Correct.
And the only reason I asked the question is when he referred to it as the Medicaid reimbursement. So I thought it was segregated different from the third-party rescue.
It's part of that.
I have just a couple of questions. Most of what I wanted to ask was already answered. I'm under the impression that if you're not at full staff, that attributes a lot to the overtime. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay, so when do you anticipate being close to or near or at full staff?
So we were when we hired the last group of 15, and they get on the trucks in January. We're probably at full staff then, very close to full staff. We had a couple of retirements. We have a couple more coming up. We believe we're going to have probably 6 or 7 more in July and August. That's going to affect us.
So based on the fact that there's a chance you could get closer to full staff, is there a chance just by the mere nature of that, that the overtime will in fact be reduced? And the reason I'm asking this is because you know that the council is under the daunting task of looking at a budget with a tax increase and possibly subsequent tax increases. So we're just trying to be really careful for the people that
No, I understand.
elected us.
It's hard.
So it's a question that, you know, if you can get closer to full staffing, will it help reduce the overtime? And if in fact, can we try and estimate what that is?
I can't estimate what the overtime is going to be. We believe it's going to be about 5 million. Definitely hiring firefighters makes a big difference. Like I said, each shift is basically 44 firefighters. Our minimum staffing is 41. If 4 people are out, it costs overtime. So that's it. That's IOD, sick, vacation, family leave for a funeral. It affects overtime. It's
So
automatic.
you're saying if you go from 44 to 40, that's automatically 1 overtime
overtime.
spot. If it goes to 39, it's 2.
Yes.
If it goes to 37, it's 7.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Do I have any other questions? No, everything else I was going to ask did get answered. Does anyone else have any questions for Councilwoman Renzulli?
Thank you, Vice President Ferry. Chief Warren, I apologize if someone asked this before I arrived. The severances, I can assume is that from the retirements that you anticipate, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And just in the gasoline and oil, obviously gas prices have gone up. My question is, how do you, I've been asking every department this who has an increase, how do you calculate this number? And is it necessarily even enough?
It may not be enough. We're actually short this year. We got to move some money around for other accounts. It skyrocketed. I think we're paying right now like $4.48 a gallon for diesel. It's jumped up over $1 for us.
So this could even be higher than is here.
It could be. It
Okay.
could be.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Councilwoman Marino.
Thank you. Good evening, Chief Warren. Thank you, first of all, to you and your department. You do an outstanding job. I know I've told you that outside of session, and it's worth repeating tonight, especially with some of the very involved fires this year. But I had a couple of questions. I apologize if they were asked earlier, but I had a question with the fire alarm, the traffic signal repairs. There's a significant jump in the proposed budget for 2023 for that. And I'm just wondering, is there a particular reason why
Yeah.
there must be?
So we have to replace the traffic light at Wellington and Park Avenue. It was damaged. It came down. We did a temporary repair and there's been many accidents there. So we are under the gun to get it fixed. It's going to be about $40,000 to get it done. It's an outside vendor that does that.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then with respect to the rescues, or I call them rescue runs, my question to you is, in the budget as proposed through the administration, it proposes revenue being significantly increased, like $4,100,000. And I was just looking at the stats, looks like the actual for 2021 was 3,718,000 and change. And I think you're running on target for this year, which is somewhere around 3.5. So my concern is whether or not that 4,100,000 is really, you know, an accurate projection. I'm afraid we might be overshooting it, so.
The current budget is 2,500,000 and the proposed budget is 3,100,000. It's line item 41522.
Okay. So it's on track for projection. Michael, yeah, yep,
Correct, yes.
okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Vargas.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Chief Warren. Echoing what the Councilwoman Marino and I assume some of my other colleagues probably said, I want to thank you for your service and all the men and women in the fire department as well for everything that you do. My apologies for being late this evening. I think I have only about 2 questions. One of them on there on the expense side, I noticed that the part-time help went from 10,000 in the current budget to 0. I'm just curious, was someone let go? Did someone retired? What is
Someone
that?
retired. So we decided not to fill it. We
Okay,
didn't fill it last year. It went 10,000, never got used, so we decided not to fill it.
okay, yeah, and, so I appreciate that. Thank you, yes, because I noticed that it was at 2021, it was also 0, then we allocated again. Now it's been proposed to be removed. Do you think it should be kept at 0? I'm just wondering, not trying
Yeah,
to
it was
ask
for one
whether
of
what
our,
foreseen the future.
part-time clerks in the office, and she had retired. We didn't replace her. I mean, could we use somebody? I'm sure we could. But we tried to save the money there.
Okay, nope, that's just making sure that that wouldn't
Yeah, we didn't let
be any
anybody go. No one
interruption
was-
or
no one's-
anything
no one
at
lost their
all.
job.
And then secondly, I was just curious on, and I apologize as well if someone already asked this question. On the fire alarm side, on the radio maintenance, there was a $50,000 also being proposed, same as the current fiscal year that we're in. Do you foresee like any maintenance? I know that might be a little hard. You don't know what breaks and what doesn't, but given the fact that right now on the expense side, I think out of the 50, there's about maybe 22 remaining, with the understanding obviously where that's only up to the 3rd quarter numbers. What do you
So
think
some
you're
of
gonna
that
use
is
that?
contractual. It's billed out to a company that does work on our radio maintenance. So one of the things about our radios or us as Cranston is that we're metro control, which what's that mean? We do all the radio controls for the metro area by the state, for the state. We now dispatch all the boats for Narragansett Bay. So we have to upgrade our radios all the time, and it's very expensive. So we'd like to have more money in there, actually. But that we need that to keep our radios working and upgraded in the fire alarm.
Oh,
It's
abs-
important.
Absolutely. I was just making sure that, that was, I mean, I saw 23,000. I'm just curious, not that you're not going to use, because again, we still have another quarter,
spend
but
it.
absolutely.
spend it.
Yes, no, absolutely on that. And then replacement vehicles, are we pretty good on
That's,
that as well? Is
those-
there any,
That's just rescues. So that's a rescue next year.
any grants coming up other than Safer Grant?
We're waiting two AFGs, which I said that was for nozzles and hose, and a new ladder truck. So not gonna let me get that.
All right. Thank you. That's all I had for this evening. Thank you once again.
Okay. Oh, Council President.
How much is a ladder truck these days?
Be 1.4 million.
I said 1 million. I leaned over there. 1.4. Wow. You guys getting
They
the
increased
satellite radio with that?
17% over their prices from last year.
Wow. All right. How's lead time on that when you order a
It
truck?
takes 20 months.
20 months. Which ladder do you plan on replacing?
Garden City. It's a
Garden City.
20-year-old truck in that station.
Okay. All right. I have one more question, Mr. Chairman. Under
Certainly.
fire alarm, computer maintenance and repairs, I see that's up 20,000.
Again, we're trying to upgrade our dispatch center with that. So it's All the dispatch center computers were
Okay.
there.
All right. I know a few years ago you had mentioned they were doing an upgrade across the whole city.
We did. We went from a VHF channel to an 800 megahertz channel. We're tied into the state system now, which has improved our radio transmissions tremendously.
No more dead spots in the city.
Very few, very small.
Okay,
We
excellent.
can talk from Wesley to Woonsocket now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I had forgotten to ask. I see that there's no one on Zoom and I don't think there's anyone in chambers. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make any comments on the budget hearings tonight? I have to ask that.
There's no public comment.
No one in chambers. Okay, I close public comments. Thank you. Okay, we all set? Chief, thank you very much for being here, being so prepared, and we appreciate all that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And
I really do.
thank you.
I need bigger font for next year. That's what I need.
Okay. Next, we have the police department. So who's representing the police department tonight?
Mr. Chairman, if,
Do you want us to wait?
Mr.
Municipal court's not here either, right?
I see Director Lima here if you wanted to do canvassing, if it's okay, if he's prepared.
He would be glad to take up as much time as you need. Major Catalano, would you prefer we wait?
I'm gonna let you know 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
No, Nick doesn't know yet, but we're timing him.
He's gonna be a little bit, 15 minutes at least. I mean.
We'll keep canvassing as short as we can.
You wanna just approve the budget and be all set, or you wanna?
Do I have? Before we begin, is there anyone that would like to participate in public comment on the canvassing budget? No public comment. I close public comment on canvassing. So next up, and we had put Nick last, just in case he would be long, is canvassing. Director Lima, we welcome you. If you want to give us a short explanation of exactly what it is you do and introduce your budget to us, we would appreciate it. And I would remind everyone on the panel that we want to keep all the questions we ask pertaining to the budget, not questions about how we vote or when we vote or anything like that. We want to keep the questions specifically to questions on the budget, please. Thank you. You're up.
Thank you, Chairman Ferry, members of the committee and the council. So the canvassing authority is both one of the smallest and at times one of the largest departments in the city. Obviously, on election day, we've got our 5 board members, we have election field techs, we have 350 poll workers, another 600 or so in reserve that have worked past elections. And of course, we have our full-time staff of 4 people, myself included. And then we additionally get support from the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State, and we're responsible to follow the directives and regulations promulgated by those 2 state agencies. We additionally have to, of course, follow state and federal law as it pertains to elections, which dictates the vast majority of the work we do on a daily basis, and that's processing voter registrations. We process anywhere between 20 and 25,000 voter registration updates annually for Cranston registered voters. In addition to thousands of signatures verified on nomination papers, and of course, starting in June, doing candidate declarations, verifying nomination papers, preparing ballot and bond charter questions for placement, reviewing ballot design, and selecting polling places, which is actually something we're engaged in right now. Just this morning, we wrapped up inspection on our 38th and final polling place. We had a team of about 10 people, including staff from the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, Rhode Island Disability Law Center, and the Board of Elections, as well as staff from our office, myself, that visited and inspected for ADA compliance and as well as for practical usage, all the public and private buildings in the city that we intend or may need to use as polls. Now, I said we had 36 to 38 inspections that we did. We only actually currently have 25 polls that we're looking to open up for the 2022 election. That's what we've budgeted for. That's a decrease of a couple of polls from what we had in 2020. Some of our costs have increased, but when I created this budget, obviously the largest discretionary line item is the elections line item, 52610 at $223,000. The reason it's at that figure is our actual costs that are predicted for our poll workers, which is spelled out a little bit, and I imagine the members of the committee and the council have the breakdown in the line of $105,000, and that's budgeted for 25 locations for both the primary and 25 locations for the November general election. $17,000 for police details and security. That's a decrease from what we saw in 2020. Usually our security operations plan doesn't require as large of an expense in a midterm election year. $3,500 for polling place rentals. We're fortunate. Most of our locations in the city do not charge us a fee for renting a location. Only a handful of the halls and social clubs do. And actually, we were able to eliminate one or two of the ones that did going into this year's election cycle. So that cost is low compared to many other towns. The stipends that the Board of Canvassers receives are in a combination of both state and city law at $7,000. They receive $1,000 per election. That's 3 board members. So it's $2,000 in an election year. In addition to attending what can be 20 to 25 board meetings in the course of an election year, the board members also have to come in the office during the day, during business hours, between 2 and 3 times a week to sign nomination papers and mail ballot certifications and other forms. And the board also has other responsibilities to attend trainings and actually has to take about an entire week off from work during the election, not just for election day, but setting up polling places, provisional ballots, recounts, and write-ins. Election day setup crews is usually one of our larger expenses. That's $20,000. That's money that basically goes to other departments to cover their overtime. Like I said, we're one of the largest departments in the city on election day because we have building maintenance, parks and recreation, highway department, IT, law office, tax assessors, city clerk's office, purchasing, just about everybody in the city. It's an all hands on deck operation when we have a major election. And we have various city personnel that assist in many different ways. Elections legal advertising, those are ads that are required by state law. We keep those costs as minimal as possible. It's budgeted at $6,000. That's because we run our ads in the Cranston Herald, which luckily charges maybe a quarter of what the Providence Journal charges for running the same ad. So by sticking with the Herald, we keep that low. Printing $1,000, that's necessary for various types of forms that we have to have printed for our office. We have $15,000 budgeted for a referendum mailing. That's based on quotes I've received, as well as based on the current expected postage rate we're going to have this fall. The council does have a couple of charter questions that were passed in 2020 for inclusion on the ballot in 2022. So we do have a referenda mailing that we'll be conducting this fall. And of course, if there's anything else that is added between now and June, that would be included in that mailing as well. So that's an actual cost. Election supplies and equipment, about $2,500. That's signage, temporary ADA signage and cones and handicap signage that we have to put up at certain locations that don't have it normally, as well as vote here signs, things just like that we're required to put up at polling locations. And like I said previously to the council, the newest big expenditure is about $46,000. And that's for the early voting costs in logistics. Early voting didn't exist prior to 2020. It was passed by the General Assembly in July of 2020. We luckily had a grant of over $40,000 that covered the bulk of our staffing costs for early voting that year. We are required 20 days prior to the election to conduct early voting during business hours, which means at 8:30, we have to have the polling place open, which means we need personnel usually at the location by 7:30 to make sure the voting machines are turned on and everything's pulled out of storage or out of a locked room and ready to go. And also it means that voters will continue to vote until 4:30. The last voter in line enters the building at 4:30, which means our staff is typically there till 6 o'clock or later for each of those days in that 20-day period. That's a significant cost for us because we saw in 2020 between 700 and 1,000 voters per day the last few days. I don't know if we'll see that same volume this year. It's a midterm year. Turnout's usually a little bit lower, but say we have 600 to 700, we still need the same personnel and staff members. So that's what that cost is, and that represents the increase you see in the budget between this year and 2020. And one note I did mention to the council previously, but I'll reiterate it. If you look at the FY21 cost for this line at $181,000, that does not include the fact that we received nearly $100,000 in grants that year. So the actual elections cost that year was well over $250,000. We were able to keep the elections pretty much in budget though, because of between grants from the Secretary of State's office, CTCL, as well as expected reimbursement from FEMA. So that's the bulk of that line item. The other line items we have overtime, actually have a decrease in there compared to FY 2021. That's mostly because we do have another full-time staff member in the office, as you know, and I expect overtime to be a little bit less because of that. That said, there are unavoidable points in time where we still have to come in nights, weekends, poll worker training classes, which are in the evenings, where overtime is required. As far as discretionary items, the education program at $200, that is an increase of over the $155 we had the previous year. That's for our membership in the Rhode Island Town and City Clerks Association, of which I'm an active member. The annual dues are $50 and it's $40 now to attend meetings. So that's right about the cost there. There's 4 meetings a year. And maintenance contracts also has an increase from $250 to $300. In an election year, we have an office clock in timestamp. We have that maintained at least twice a year and also as needed if it breaks down. So every single form, mail ballot, voter registration, candidate declaration is clocked in on that timestamp, and that's how that's maintained. The only other discretionary line item is office supplies and expenses. We usually have $1,000 budgeted for that in an election year. That's typically what we about spend just for our routine office supplies in the office, and typically the non-election years would bump it back down to 900. So that's what I have here. I'm happy to answer any other questions about our budget the council members have.
Council President Paplaskas.
Thank you, Council Vice President. First and foremost, Nick, on behalf of the council, just want to give you our sincere condolences to you and Tom on passing your grandmother. Thank you for being here this evening. You certainly didn't have to, but appreciate you being here, and our condolences.
Thank you.
I have one question. I mean, you run a tight ship. The numbers are right on as always. You do a wonderful job there. Just have a question on early voting, and forgive me, Chairman, if it has nothing to do with the budget. Do you plan on doing that here at City Hall? Is there an extra cost associated to that? Are you doing it somewhere else? That's
So
the question
it's
I have.
not finalized yet. The reason it worked well in City Hall in 2020, because the schools were on distance learning, so there was parking here, there was space here to do it. But it worked. It worked on the fly because we had to make it work. But the space we have in the foyer downstairs really isn't adequate for what we'd like to do. We couldn't set up as many privacy booths as we wanted. We couldn't have as many check-in stations or voting machines as we would like to have for that volume of voters. That's why in the last day you saw a line that stretched from here all the way to the fire station. In order to avoid that, our plan is, and we still have to have it approved, would be to use the Pastori Youth Center, which would involve at least one of our staff members being there for a good chunk of the day, along with our early voting poll worker crew. We've talked to the Parks and Recreation Department. They're amenable to it. They can work with us on that. Programming could continue at the Pastori Youth Center for the bulk of the time we'd be using it, because we don't expect a large turnout, for example, the first week in the primary. Also in the primary, we'll have less staff. It'll be cheaper to operate there. There's obviously that we have a larger space. It's well lit. It's very ADA compliant with automatic doors, plenty of parking spaces. And overall, it's just more conducive for us to, as an environment, to use as a polling place. It's a polling place as well on election day. As far as extra costs for that, in terms of our early voting, we have got a couple $1,000s that's included in that 46 to help us out with any supplies we need directly for that. For example, we might need to purchase a couple of dollies or carts just to make sure we can move the equipment that we have for early voting in the foyer of the Pastori Youth Center into a locked room at night and then back out in the morning. That'll help us quickly set up. It's actually probably going to save us in overtime and whatnot once we get into a rhythm of that process. But we're talking 20 days before the September primary, 20 days before the general election. That's 40 days, although we're not open on the weekends for early voting. So that's a considerable use of time. And I think to do it here at City Hall with school in session and, 10, 12 poll workers working downstairs and maybe 800, 900 people coming in here in an 8-hour period would be problematic, I think, for the city's operations.
Yeah, thank you. Just follow up on the parking. I mean, I'm sure some of you get calls from teacher friends that are getting tickets, and parking is certainly an issue here with schools. So I don't know. With the turnout we had last year, you couldn't do that here, with school in session. So just again, thank you very much, Nick. Great job as always, and thank you for being here.
Any other questions? Auditor DeMaio?
Director Lima, have you received any grants lately? And are there any grants that you may be able to apply for during the election in November?
We actually just applied for and received the grants in the Herald this week, $50,000 for election and cybersecurity. That's going to go directly to the IT department for not just elections upgrades, but upgrades for our entire city infrastructure and training for all city personnel in IT. And the reason we can justify that, it's federal elections money through HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, that was allocated by Congress to the Secretary of State's office to use at the Secretary's discretion. And the Secretary set up a program where cities and towns could identify needs in terms of cybersecurity preparedness that affect elections offices directly or indirectly. In this case, we're all in the same network in the building. If there's an attack against the tax assessor's office, we're subsequently also attacked. And if the city network goes down, our ability to run the election is compromised. So the justification there is we need to strengthen and harden our entire network and also improve training for the entire city. And that $50,000 grant, I think, is going to go a long way to help do that.
And we have received the funds already?
I think the check should be in the mail. We should be getting it the next week or two. I've been told. Other than that, unfortunately, there's not a lot of programs out there right now. The CTCL, which gave, like I said, a $40,000 grant to us in 2020, is not offering grants this year. They don't have the same funding sources they had. There are other grants we took advantage of. There's 4 or 5 grants actually we applied for in 2020 and 2021. But again, all those sources aren't offering the same opportunities this year. And unfortunately, in the election space, especially outside of a presidential year, there is less focus and attention on elections at a national level. So there isn't as many benefactors out there willing to allocate those funds.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Renzulli?
Thank you. Director Lima, in every department, it was my understanding that the hospitalization was going to be estimated to go up 10%. And I think that it did, at least everywhere else, but yours seems to have gone down. And I would think that then maybe your buyback would go up, but that also went down. So I just want to make sure that that's correct.
So when Emerson Brito came on, at the time, the city didn't know whether, when the position was added, whether he had a family plan or a single plan. So we budgeted last year for the family plan. He took the single plan, to my understanding. So that because that employee uses the single plan, we now know that and we can budget appropriately for it.
Okay, so the increase of 10% was still added to his plan from this year. There was still an increase, it's just based on a single plan versus a family plan.
Yeah, that's why it decreased. Yeah.
No other questions? Director Lima, we'd like to thank you for your hard work. We're confident that you do a good job and you're very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You as well.
Chief's here. Okay. Next, we'll have the Police Department. Chief Winquist, we welcome you to our budget hearings. Is there anyone in chambers or on Zoom that would like to participate in public comment on this matter?
There's no public comment on Zoom.
Okay, I therefore close public comment on police budget. Welcome tonight. If you just want to spend a minute telling us a little bit about your department, yourself, and then introduce your budget to us, and we subsequently might have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Well, right now, we're down 6 officers from the 153, which is full staffing for the police department. 5 of those positions are contractually left open. Well, 4 of them, I should say, and then 1 by agreement between the union and the administration, the mayor's administration. So, and we have probably 3 or 4 expected retirements in the next few months. So we know that we're gonna lose some personnel very shortly. We do have a hiring list in place right now. We've begun the process of background checks and things of that nature to replace the 1 position in anticipation of the other positions that are coming up. So we're a busy police department. I don't know if you got a chance to review our annual report, which we just completed, but we had close to 80,000 calls for service last year, which is about average. Since COVID has ended, we have seen an uptick in activity across the city, but I'm proud to say over the last year, we continue to decrease the crime rates, both property crime and crimes against persons. And in some of those areas, we're at a 10-year low based on the hard work of the men and women of the Cranston Police Department. We recently were reaccredited, both state and national accreditation, which is no easy feat. It takes a lot of work. There's over 400 standards that you have to meet, and we just finished that process. And we received a letter last week that we're accredited for another 4-year period. So that's a point of pride for us, if you will. We're one of 9 police departments in the state of Rhode Island that have achieved national accreditation. So that's our 4th accreditation award since they sought accreditation before I became the chief. So proud of those accomplishments. Because of COVID being over, we're much more active in the community. We had a Coffee with a Cop event earlier today here in Grove Square. We have a crisis intervention team that's doing really well, that received a lot of media attention, where we go out with mental health clinicians into the field and deal with people that are having substance abuse problems or mental health problems. And we are actually trying to obtain a $500,000 grant from Senator Whitehouse office is assisting us with that to actually expand that
How
program.
much was that?
$500,000. Nothing's in stone, but that's what we submitted our grant for, and hopefully we'll be successful in that pursuit. And that will essentially pay for 2 full-time mental health clinicians to be assigned to the Cranston Police Department. We'll also pay for the 16 officers who are trained in that particular area to go out and do follow-up on all these different calls that come in for mental health crises. So that's an area that we continue to expand upon and is much needed in the city of Cranston. So those are some of the things that we have underway right now. Our officers are well-trained. We finished crisis intervention training, implicit bias training over the last year. We are dedicated and committed to making sure that we have the best training of any police department in the state of Rhode Island. So we're doing well in that particular area. In regards to the budget, as you can see, we're more or less been level funded through the mayor's office, which we understand is difficult times currently in times ahead. There was a slight increase in some areas, particularly in the area of salaries, and that's all been as a result of contractual raises that were bargained and agreed upon a few years ago. So there are some raises, and anytime there's a salary increase, other line items are obviously affected, like longevity pay, pension contributions. It's all connected to one another. There was an increase that we don't have any control over, which is the crossing guards. Although they fall under the police department budget, we don't negotiate that contract. That contract, I believe, is already negotiated, and there was an increase in that particular area. And then rent, we pay rent at the police department. We don't own the building, so that went up to 1.4 million. So those are some of the increases. But overall, when we met with Director Strom, he made it very clear that we aren't going to have any increases. So if you look across the years, we've more or less been level funded for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's become a great challenge for us because obviously there's 8% inflation rate right now, and gas and oil is going through the roof, and we obviously use a lot of that. And we have to being patrolled 24/7. So we understand the challenging times that we're in. We're doing our best to offset different costs within our budget. So that's where we are today. And if you have any questions for me, we'd like to answer them.
Okay, I'd like to open up the floor to questions. Councilman Donegan?
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
How are you, sir?
Good to hear.
Well, thank you. Just again, appreciate everything that the department does, whether it's you or the major, always been, or majors, excuse me, always been very responsive to concerns, and I appreciate that, as to the residents. One question, overtime, it's running 91% through so far. Any insights other than just staffing or, and is there anything that can be done to try and reduce that?
Well, we're pretty, we watch that pretty closely. And you can see throughout the years, it's raised slightly, but it hasn't raised incremental with the raises that are built in. So in reality, the overtime budget, I would say, is less than really what it should be, in all honesty. And then don't forget, we are down, we agreed contractually to go down those 5 officers, and now we're down 6. And we've had a lot of, like I said, an uptick in activity, special events, things of that nature. So there's a lot that's beyond our control. We have a minimum staffing level. I don't want to say minimum manning, but in the patrol division, first and second shift, they have 10 officers at least on that shift, and then 8 during the third shift. So if somebody calls out or whatever, they're allowed actually to go below two below that staffing level. So we do have to replace officers on overtime on occasion, but for the most part, we make it work, and a lot of it is special events. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Manzulli?
Thank you. I'll be quick. I also asked this question to the fire department. I know that gas and oil is going up. I'm just curious if this is how this was estimated, if this is enough of an increase of only $60,000.
Yes, that's an estimate of what we expect. And we did explore electric vehicles, by the way. I know a lot of departments are doing that, but for police work right now, the cars are not ready for that level of like frontline cars. I hope down the road that may be the case, like there are hybrid cruisers, but unfortunately, all those vehicles cost more than the vehicles we're buying now. So the average cruiser doesn't last, more than 4 or 5 years on the front line just because of the mileage that we put on it. So, and then the cost of the battery chargers and things like that, it's not conducive yet, but we are down the road, hopefully going to be able to go in that direction.
Okay, are you currently running on budget for gas and oil this year? Or I'm just meaning if it's, I'm not saying you're asking for too much. I'm just curious if it could possibly be under budgeted, the increase.
I think Mr. Igo will be able to answer that. I think we were all surprised when we saw the prices here at the pump, so we didn't really anticipate when we first did the budget, but we were tracking.
It looks like we're right on budget. 60% of the budget through February. March bills haven't been posted yet.
And then for the severance, are you anticipating retirements?
Yeah, we have probably 4 or 5 retirements or people, resigning. There's one individual that might be going to a federal agency. So that's likely going to happen. That's why we anticipated some of the severance pay.
That's all I had. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Jermaine?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
It was nice to see you last week.
Same here.
Yes. First of all, I want to commend you for this initiative, adding mental health worker, the clinician. I remember it was last year or 2020 when we received this email about someone that sent something, and we have a conversation
Yes.
about how we can address those people who really do not need other type of intervention. And adding this component in the police station, that means a lot. because we see a lot of things happen and people, they are really impacted by mental health. And often we take like taboo. We don't want to talk about mental health issue. And this is really, I commend you for that.
Thank you.
And we hope that you have this grant to really level funded, right?
Yes, currently it's being funded with COVID money, which will expire. So we're hoping that this will transition and allow the program to keep going after that money's expired.
Very good. My question is, I asked this question on Monday. It's about the city plan, line item 53507. City claims.
Claims, okay.
Yeah, so I really have a little problem with claims. And I asked the question, how in each department, what we can do to proactively, we know accident happens, okay? But sometimes we may find some reckless, or if there is really no accountability because we are self-insured.
Yes.
And we know this is not another company that will, sue us, it's our money. And often you will find people don't pay attention. So my question is, in your department, do you have some measure to counter those type of behavior if someone like all the time, get into some, or whether litigation, whether accident, and how we can work to really prevent the repetitive things happening.
Right, so we have an early warning system. So anytime an officer is involved in any type of crash, that information is, well, first off, it's reviewed, a supervisor responds to the scene, and that crash is fully investigated by a supervisor, and photographs are taken, and we do a thorough job of investigating those. But they also entered into our early warning system, our Guardian system. So if the same officer gets in more than 2 crashes, it flags it, and then all of us will be notified, and then we'll say, well, was this, behavior that needs to be addressed? Maybe the officer needs more retraining. But I'll be honest with you, it's been pretty spread out, the and we've had a lot less accidents than we've had in the last few years. So they're being very cautious. But when you drive the miles that they drive, and you drive in the conditions that they drive, and they're responding to calls for service, occasionally you're going to have those crashes that occur. And of course, when a crash does occur, people like to sue the police department in the city because, at the time they say they're not hurt, and then a month later, lo and behold, they have a neck or back injury, and they try to get as much money as they can and settle the case. And sometimes these cases are settled quickly, and sometimes they fight the cases, but it's less expensive to sometimes to settle the cases. So I think that's, people have a tendency to sue the city, even when it's not even their officer's fault. So we do deal with those, but if an officer continually gets into accidents, then we'll try to find out exactly what the cause is. And we have discipline all the way up to retraining, emergency vehicle training, things of that nature. So we've never had to go to that level because, again, I don't see a pattern of behavior from a single officer.
Also, not only about the accident happen, we know we have some litigation happen as well. Do you have some sort of flag as well in terms of arrest or something that, how they conduct this investigation to get an arrest, something like that? Do you have also this type of measure to flag it?
Yes, so it's not just driving behavior that's flagged. If an officer has multiple complaints about unprofessional behavior, discourteous behavior, not only are they going to be investigated if a complaint comes to the department, fully investigated by the Office of Professional Standards, which reports directly to me, but also if it's a minor incident where the officer was maybe discourteous, he may get counseled. So they brought in and saying, hey, be aware that we're watching this. You need to watch your conduct, so on and so forth. And that goes into the Guardian system. And now if that continues, then it flags that particular behavior. If an officer is repetitively out sick after a certain number of times, that produces a flag. So there's early warning systems for all that particular behavior. And those officer does a good job, that also goes into the same system. We do.
Recognize that too, right?
Yeah,
Because
we gotta
not
recognize
only-
both. So I get letters of appreciation all the time, and I scan those right into the Guardian system, and then the officer gets a notice on it, and then every supervisor up the chain that has that officer is notified as well. So I think we have to recognize both good and behavior that needs to be corrected. So it is a good system and it works pretty well.
Definitely. I have to mention that in 2018, the claim was $86,063. And we see the decrease. So I don't know, when did you come?
I came in 2014, October.
2014?
Yes.
Okay. So we see, I think you address it, we have the decrease from that one, and we can continue to have this decrease.
And a lot of it is training too. We do a lot of different types of training to reduce the liability on the city, and also being an accredited police department, we're required to meet a lot of the high training standards and policies that are all checked. So I think that also helps offset, behavior that will lead to a claim.
Thank you.
Thank you
Chief.
very much.
Councilwoman Vargas.
Thank you, Chairman. Colonel, good evening. Hope everything's well with you and the family, and thank you for keeping Cranston safe. And of course, I echo that also to all the men and women in blue. Just a few questions for you. I know you had mentioned the lease on the building and rent. The proposed budget is gone up. I think it went from like maybe 13, bear with me, have glasses and I still can't see. Went up from 1.3 to 1.4. How many more years are left to get on the lease? And did rent go up? Is there a contract? If so, I'm just trying to get a sense as to why it went up. Are we trying to pay for it right away?
Mike will be able to answer that, I think.
So the monthly rent on that building is $88,750 a month. It's also a triple net lease, which means that we're responsible for the taxes and insurance on the building. So the reason for the increase is we have the set fee of $88,750 a month, but then we have the flexible number of the tax bill, the city's tax bill. So basically, it goes up, but it's also coming back in to the city as part of our tax rate.
Taxes. Left.
I believe it goes until 2030, and then we have the option to buy it for another $1 million at the end.
Is he responsible for the maintenance as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, plowing and everything else that goes with it. Okay, thank you. My next question was, sorry, that was question one, went out of order here. Forfeitures, I know we had that discussion during budget last year. Are we, what we're getting, if we're getting anything in the forfeitures at all, is that being allocated in a separate line item under other revenues, or where is that actually being potentially?
That is
allocated?
tracked by City Hall, so it's not, I don't believe it's a line item in the actual budget, because it can't be, because the money can't be used to supplant any type of expenses the department would normally incur. So we've used it for a wide array of things, such as the plate reader cameras that we mentioned, that was paid entirely through the federal forfeiture money, and things that we normally wouldn't be able to afford to get within the budget, but we have to be really cautious of like using that money again to buy things that a city would normally, purchase for a police department.
So where's that forfeiture dollar amount being allocated, Mike, then, or Colonel, in the city, if it's not in the police department, if you don't?
It's not, it's a special revenue fund that doesn't get included as part of the general fund budget.
That was the line item that I think we had a conversation about potentially adding in. I'm not sure if that had to be by way of ordinance or how eventually that would work, but we can always discuss that.
Yeah, I don't believe legally you can do it, because the money is set aside as a forfeiture that they retrieved from some arrest. And legally, they have to keep that money separate from the general fund and can only use it on, as the colonel said, only on certain items.
Right, okay. The other question that I did have was on VINs. I think on the VIN, that I have scratched that, I'm gonna start off with something else just because I'm on that same page, part-time help. The part-time help, Colonel, was, I think there's about $37,000 remaining on there. Is it, but then proposed, I believe, went up a little bit, just by like 6,000.
I think that was, I think there was an increase in the hourly rate, and I think that's what it is. But we don't have a lot of part-time help, but they are, very good workers that help the police department run the administrative aspect of some of like the records unit and some other units.
Okay, no, fair enough. And then the harbor master side as well?
Yeah,
Are we doing that or is that separate? I know that falls under the
that
police
falls under
department
the
though. Okay, all right. So I'll have a question on harbor master later on. The other one was on VINs. I know the revenue that was predicted on the VIN side was. I'm on the expenditures. Give me 1 second. I had it on here. I think it was slightly a little higher. I'm just pretty much trying to get a census. Do you think the revenue is still going to be consistent?
So during COVID, the DMV allowed registrations without really doing a physical VIN check. So we essentially shut down. And I can tell you, I was very vocal through the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association and through the DMV. We need to reopen the VIN station. We can wear masks, we can do it safely. And it took a lot longer than I hoped. So we lost a lot of revenue, but now we're getting, a lot of people. We have a line all the way down the road because people all of a sudden are buying cars, registering cars all at once, to the point we had to put a second officer there just to keep up with the amount of cars that are going through on a daily basis. So that is going to continue to be a high revenue item because our proximity to the DMV. We're very convenient. As you know, we're near the ice rink now. We put like a lane through, and we made it a lot easier for people to drive through without clogging up the Public Works parking lot, which was not an ideal location to have that VIN station.
Thank you. And under other revenues as well, I know the proposal is about $35,000 increase as well under other revenue. Do you foresee other revenue as well being coming in at $35,000 more than?
You know what revenue that particularly? I mean, that could be a wide range of things. If you could carry concealed weapon permits that come in, basically the records department, things of that nature. So again, everybody's coming back out, so we're seeing an increase in just about every area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Marino.
Thank you. Good evening, Colonel. Thank you for everything that you do every day in your department. Everyone has my utmost admiration and respect.
Thank you.
And that's worth mentioning this evening. With respect to the budget, Councilwoman Vargas touched upon a question I had with respect to other revenue. That my question was the current projections for this year, or the actuals, I should say, is that you're seeing some significant increase. So that might explain then why it's going to be increased for next year. Because right now you're running like 266% more than it was anticipated in that category.
Right.
Okay. And then I had a question with respect to the training center. I know previously the anticipated revenue was like 21,000 and change. I know this year so far there isn't revenue there. Some other departments, sometimes the revenue wasn't showing because it was anticipated in the last quarter of the year. And I just didn't know if that was the case for that, for the training center as well.
Right. So a lot of the, because of COVID, a lot of departments canceled their trainings that we anticipated. And now they're all catching up. So we have a lot more activity at the training facility. And there's 5 or 6 departments, I think, in total that use the facility, and they pay us a fee to do that. And that goes into a budget to obviously maintain the range and the other buildings that are up there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilwoman Manzulli.
Thank you. In the revenue line, 43201, the photostat fee, police department, I see that has anticipated to go down about $35,000. I'm just wondering, are people not coming in significantly for the reports anymore, or is that perhaps going into the other revenue or another line?
Yeah, the major can answer that
So
question.
the reason there's $35,000 offset in that line, that's with that 35,000. There's no longer a stack fee. After $35,000 was in last deposit as far as council deposits, that's for 35,000. It was deposited in that line. There's no more photo static fee. People don't come in, buy the reports online, software that they utilize, they log in, we get sent by a check, it's deposited into that other plan. So we just put 35,000 on that, and that's why that's negative 35,000.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilman Riley.
Thank you, Vice President. Colonel, thank you for being here tonight. I have a question more on the revenue side. I'm looking at the municipal court budget, and obviously that pertains to traffic tickets. Prior to the pandemic in 2019, the revenue there was 687,409. Then it dropped down during the pandemic to just under 500,000. But this year it's being budgeted at only 475, which would be in essence less than what the actual was even during the pandemic. So what my hope is, and I say this because the majority of calls I receive is about speeding on different streets throughout the neighborhoods and communities. So clearly people are out there speeding. Were there different policies in 2019? Is there a way that we can get back to where we were pre-pandemic?
I think we will. It has taken the officers a while to shift gears, if you will, and get out of the pandemic mode where we weren't stopping anybody. And now in those care details, that's where the majority of the tickets are written. So when you have a complaint in this particular area, usually patrol officers are busy handling calls. So we try to specifically send a detail officer to those locations. And for a while, there was so many details out there that one of the things officers don't really enjoy doing is writing tickets, believe it or not. So I think they were taking a lot of other details that are out there, but I do feel there'll be a shift back towards those details and we will get back to where we need to be. 2019 was a year it was through the roof for whatever reason. And, then everything happened after that. So, the issue is we can't order officers to write tickets by law. They can't be any ticket quotas or things of that nature, but, they are focusing on the more dangerous drivers. We do have different details like seatbelt details, pedestrian safety details, things like that. So we're getting a lot of money to do these details. So I'm starting to see an increase. I do track that on a regular basis, and it's slowly getting back to where it was.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Council President Paplaskas.
Thank you, Chair. Councilman Riley actually took my question. I was going to ask if you still had the CARES program going, because that's a majority of our phone calls. And with springtime coming and people taking out their sports cars, we're going to have way more calls. So I'm glad to hear that's still in the works and you're still doing that, because certainly traffic enforcement and education is very important. So glad to hear. My next question is a fairly easy one. The Explorer program, I saw it's still budgeted. We still have the Explorer program.
Yes, we're fully back up and running again, thankfully, after COVID. And we have quite a few kids enrolled in that program. And we think we're going to be able to expand it even further. And I just added two more officers to be Explorer advisors. And to make it a little more diversified, we have a female and a minority officer that are going to be joining the Explorer program. So it's fully back running, they're meeting, and we're looking forward to, they have a lot of contests they go to and compete against other Explorer programs across the state. That's coming up soon. And that's one of our best programs. And it started thanks to the council when they gave us money to begin the program. I think Councilman Santa Maria was big, instrumental in that. So we're really proud of that program. And yeah, we're off and running again.
Yeah, that was certainly Council Vice President Santa Maria was instrumental in that back in 2014. And I'm really asking the question, so if he's watching on YouTube, he doesn't call me and yell at me tomorrow. But I guess my second part of my question is, it's been funded at 5,000 pretty much for a while. I think it was 3, and then we brought it up to 5. Is 5,000 enough to still run that program?
I believe it is. We do recognize the difficult times. The biggest cost of that program really is the uniforms. And we're doing that now, but we have gotten, other money, donations, things like that, that help that program continue to go. And besides that, there's really not a lot of cost. So that's the biggest cost of the uniforms. But I do think that's sufficient currently. Depends on how many more explorers that we get. And, the school year is ending now, and then we gear up for the next year too. So, but I think we'll be okay.
Thank you. And then I have one final question, and probably a little tougher question. Obviously, love the police department. Thank you to all the men and women that do the work. But you did say when you opened up your presentation that you're down 6 right now. There are 4 that are contractually unfunded positions, and one is 5. One of them's left open. The union has agreed with the mayor's office to keep one open. So, and there is going to be some retirements. Obviously, we're in a really tough budget, probably the toughest budget that I've ever seen in the 8 years that I've been up here. Is there any talk or position or discussion on maybe not funding those positions or funding them a half a year to give the city the ability to recoup some funds? I know you'd have to pay overtime, but I'm just trying to be creative and look for ways to try and save some money for the taxpayers without hurting the department.
That would have to be a discussion, obviously, with the unions because it is contractual. It says that those positions will be filled within a specific time frame. It might even be like 20 days, which isn't always able to do because of the way the academy is run and everything like that. But it's already obviously been bargained in and agreed upon that, that's the maximum number of vacancies that we're allowed to carry because of the contract.
And you already have a list that you can work off of now.
We have a list right now. We have a couple people that are currently law enforcement officers in another community that they could come over fairly quickly and fill the void. We've never been, I anticipate being down 10 or 11 officers. We've never been down to that degree. Will we be able to survive? Of course, the overtime costs are going to go up. But I also worry about officers being held and fatigued and all the stuff that goes along with it. And there's other communities really close by that they didn't hire for a while. They forgoed it. And then what happened was they can never catch up. I've heard other chiefs tell horror stories that they didn't have a hiring list in place. They went a year without hiring. And now we have to also consider the recruitment challenges that we have because we're not getting a lot of people that are applying to be police officers. So, by holding positions open and then trying to recruit, I don't know if it's going to get better or worse. I don't know. But again, that's it. Contractually, we have to fill the positions unless there was some type of agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Chief. Thank you.
My question was going to be, is there a plan in place to get to full staff? And you kind of answered that question. So I personally feel whether it be the police department or the fire department or a business, you want to be at full staff in case something happens where you have 4 or 5 or 6 people out that you weren't expecting to go out. So I appreciate that. Okay, we thank you very much for being here, and answering all our questions, and being so prepared.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you all for everything that you do. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too. Oh, animal control,
I'm sorry.
It
That's right. We
reminded
have to
me
do
about
animal
that.
control and harbor master, which should be very quick.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
that's okay.
I was trying to get rid of you.
Unless we're all set, I can go.
If anybody have any questions on either animal control, we'll do both at the same time, or harbor master, they're pretty much level funded budgets, and any public comment on either of those items also?
There's no public comment on Zoom.
No one in chambers? Okay, I close public comment on harbor master and animal control. Anybody have any questions on animal control or harbor master according to the budget? Councilwoman Vargas.
It's budget related, Chairman. Going back to what I was going to ask earlier on the harbor master, just kind of get a sense as to are there any potential expenses? I know last year we were talking about possible maybe equipment or boat or updating the current one that the current harbor master uses. Just
Yeah,
curious.
So our underwater recovery team shares the vessel with the harbor master. So over the years, we've been pretty good about updating, the GPS and the different mechanics of the boat. So we're in pretty good shape. It's an older boat. At some point, we should look at that. But I mean, I recognize it's not the time budget-wise to think about that. We're always looking to see if we can get a grant because a lot of the LNG tankers come right down the bay, even though we only have a small area of water and we don't have a lot of activity. That's something we look at all the time. But the boat's functional. We used it last year. We'll use it again this year. And I don't think there's any equipment right now that I can think of that is urgent that couldn't fit within the current budget.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to go on the naughty list for asking this, but I'm a little bit out of the budget. But in terms of harbor master, are we getting a lot of calls as far as that the harbor master is actually responding to, other than the training that you're doing in terms of utilizing that boat that's on here, just so I don't get in trouble for asking that question?
Last year, I think we got a single call, and that's typical. We don't get a lot of calls. It was a boat that ran adrift that was abandoned. It was a sailboat, and we ended up having to go out there, tow it. We got stuck with it. We had to have it towed, and the owner didn't want the boat. So it was kind of more of a headache, but it was rubbing up against some of the docks. So we had no choice to go out and do that. But other than that, I got to be honest, we don't get a lot of calls. We could do a lot more enforcement, but, I think that we have police officers that are trained, in that area, but having a civilian harbor master, he's limited on what he can do. And I worry, safety wise, he's not carrying a firearm. He's not, I think we could be a little more proactive in that area, and even the moorings that are out there, the fees that need to be collected, and are they registered? That we could probably be a little more proactive, but it's just never really been an area that has been an area of focus for the police department.
Great, thank you. And the second question regarding animal control, I guess it's not really a question, but more of just tell us how the animal control is doing other than or related to the budget in terms of
Well, we're
where
down
we
to
are.
a few staffing. It's a job's posted for a new animal control shelter manager. So that got posted, I believe, on Monday. And we're down one animal control officer. So we do have to fill those positions soon because it's a pretty busy place. But the good news is we've been very successful keeping the animal census down, where they're very quick to adopt the animals out. I think right now we have like 3 dogs and 3 cats. When I first got here, every one of those runs, 20-something runs, were full with poor animals that were barking, and it was chaotic. And that shelter's spotless if you go in there. You got dedicated staff that work there, and I'm hoping we can get these hirings done soon, so we can get the full staffing back to where it needs to be. Thank you.
I have a quick question about animal control. I've always adopted all of my dogs, and usually I've adopted once from Cranston, a couple of times from Charlestown. Usually pay like a fee, like $200 or whatever it is. What do we charge now?
I think it's a little over $100, and that's incorporating a lot of these dogs. Not like we have to, if they're abandoned dogs that came in, we got to give them the rabies shot. We got to take them to the vet. We got to spay or neuter the animal. So all that's kind of like included in the cost. But if somebody has a hardship, we could obviously help them out. But there is animal license fees that get collected that are supposed to offset some of those expenses. But I'm not sure, where that money, probably in a general fund somewhere. But and I don't know how many people actually register their animals. I hope they do, but they're required to do it in the city. But let's face it, we find a lot of strays that are out there with no collar. They're not registered. They're not microchipped or anything like that.
Maybe when a dog is adopted, we give them a free license the first time, and this might be a reminder that they have to pay the next time.
It's not a bad idea. If you want a nice Jack Russell, they got one down there. He's long-haired Jack Russell, a Boston Terrier. Got some really nice dogs down there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that's it for Harbor Master and Animal Control? Now you can leave.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
Thank you very much. Take a break. We'll keep going instead of taking a break, right? Okay. And last on the list tonight is municipal court. How far away is he? All right, we'll take 3 minutes. We'll take 3 minutes. Okay, we'll proceed. No Saturday. Okay. Last on tonight's agenda for budget hearings is municipal court. I'd like to welcome Chief Judge Matthew Smith and his head clerk, Elizabeth Bettis, right? Welcome tonight. If you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing, where you're going, and how much money you're going to spend and pull in.
Like, I can tell you that, given the numbers that we see. But we've actually had, is it farther away? Closer? We've actually had a fairly good year, given that the relative number of tickets that are being issued is down. But on a gradual, steady, we hope, increase as we head out of the COVID pandemic and into what we hope to be the final stages of an endemic. So we're very hopeful on that front. To make up for the lack of moving violations being, excuse me, being ticketed, we've had an increase in parking tickets, which has helped along the way. We continue to do very well in collecting from businesses on false alarms. And we also continue to do very well with housing and absentee landlords and bank-owned properties in the city that have been derelict in keeping up with various housing codes that they have found or cited to be in violation of. We've also had very good success getting people in from out of state, bank representatives in out of state, lawyers, some of those banks. So I'd like to think when the Cranston Municipal Housing Court and Municipal and Housing Court calls them, reputation is kind of now starting to precede us, and they do respond on a very good clip and very good rate. But personnel-wise, we are asking the council to accept that we are going to do away with 2 part-time positions. We are going to ask the council to approve a single full-time position listed under, I believe, administrative / court interpreter. We'll have an open process to fill that job. We presently have 1 part-time interpreter, and I can tell you without any hesitation that Ms. Nunez is invaluable to both the court and the police department. She is routinely called over to the other side to interpret for the police department. They have nobody, so she provides that service to the police department. It saves us, on average, just court hearings wise, we on average have at least 2 or 3 every single court hearing, Spanish-speaking constituents, that without her, we would be paying, depending on how much notice we give the International House or other interpreting services, anywhere from $300 a clip for their services. That does not include, but we could certainly calculate it out, how many Spanish-speaking constituents appear at the front desk of the court that she handles. Nor does that include any number of phone calls from Spanish-speaking only constituents. So she has proved invaluable, and quite frankly, in this day and age, I don't know how you can run a court or a department without some inclusivity and somebody able to speak at least the Spanish language, if not Spanish and Portuguese, to service a very diverse, continue to diversify community. Very proud of the fact that I probably have the only female Latina head in Court Administrator Bettis. We have 1 other full-time employee, and we have Yahira. So basically for the last 6 or 7 months, we've been running this court with 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, that being Ms. Nunez, who is the Spanish-speaking employee, part-time employee. So I'd like to think we make do and get along, get a lot for our buck, a lot for the city's buck with the court. We're very cost conscious. There are certain issues that have arisen this year with regard to purchasing tickets and the type of tickets we have had to purchase, despite the fact that many of you were at a demonstration of new technology that's available, where not only does it increase the efficiency of the patrolman or woman out on the beat, so to speak, especially late second and through the third shifts, with regard to writing tickets, coming back twice as required to write the violations. The new system that we proposed allowed automatic inputting of data one time, and that would download from the DMV. That would alleviate the necessity right now of the handwritten ticket system we have, which requires a minimum of 3, sometimes 4 different personnel and inputting the same information. We've not won any buy-in, so to speak, although the technology is there. We had available to us, although that opportunity has passed, to run this pilot program cost-free for a year as a demonstration pilot by Cranston, the first city to employ that technology. That went by the boards. It's still a relative bargain at $12,000 to implement, as opposed to $28,000 to $30,000 for paper tickets we recently had to purchase to continue with the same old system and the redundancies that are within that system. So that's just an example of court administrator, myself, looking to save the city and the taxpayers, the hardworking taxpayers, Cranston, money that need not be spent. But we're hopeful that we will eventually get buy-in on that, and that will become a true cost savings for the council and for the city.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for municipal court? Oh, 1 second. Is there any public comment on municipal court, either from chambers or on Zoom?
No public comment.
No public comment in chambers, so I close public comment. I'm sorry. Now we have questions. Oh, Councilman Riley.
Thank you, Vice President. Your Honor, thank you for being here tonight.
Why, Councilman?
Very good. So I just want to let you know, I put in a good word with the Colonel to try to get some revenues up for you, get some more bodies in the door.
We can only hope.
So quick question I have, you just alluded to this program, the technology. Are you saying that it only costs $12,000 per year?
It's an initial investment of $12,000. We anticipate the cost going down. The initial investment now, as opposed to being free for the year, since we missed that opportunity, is $12,000.
Okay, and why wasn't the free trial? Why didn't we take advantage of that?
Because we were told that there were technical impediments to, for lack of a better term, to adopting the new system. That turned out not to be a fact. So we are hopeful that going forward, we're going to be able to get buy-in from our police partners to implement that.
All right, thank you. It sounds like a great program.
It is. Tickets are laminated, by the way, so it's no more the dog ate my ticket.
Other questions?
And it uses all the existing technology that are in the police department. Cars, their printers. There's literally no other infrastructure investment other than different type of, for lack of a better term, servers. A limited cost.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Renzulli.
Thank you. To piggyback off the question about the technology system, so other than being less expensive than the paper we're spending for tickets, is that what you said earlier?
Far less expensive.
It's what?
Far.
Far less expensive. I don't know if this is a fair question to ask or not, but would it be fair to say that it would be more efficient to administer the tickets and perhaps increase the amount of tickets that are written because it's easier as well?
That may be a ripple effect, because, anything generally that's easier for anybody, whether it's fire department, police department, the council, ourselves, or court, anything that's easier generally will be done in a more repetitive fashion and an increased level, in my opinion. It certainly would make the jobs of the patrolmen and women out on the beat a lot easier, a lot faster. Right now, they have to use a ballpoint pen, print down like 3 or 4 copies. By the time you get down to the 3rd or 4th copy, it's not legible. That has to be inputted by a clerk at the police station and then re-inputted at least twice due to procedural problems we have with DMV, because sometimes the first take doesn't go through, or they have questions and they have to be re-inputted. Not all tickets, but some of them. And that's just a function of some of them just are not legible. We lose time, we burn man hours, in my opinion, unnecessarily, using the old manual system.
Okay, thank you. And also, I know that, I think it was last year, or maybe when I was visiting, that Clerk Elizabeth had mentioned some other technology that you were interested in and maybe fulfilling ADA requirements. Did that all go through?
We did. We were able to get a relatively low-cost bid for a new sound system that we are now, I'm proud to say, ADA compliant. That went through a competitive bid process, but we got a very, very competitive price for an entire new sound system, recording system, the electronics, the computer system that goes with it, that allows us to find where we are in the transcript. If we need to find transcript, we need to send a hearing to RITT for an appeal. It's click of a button now, you go right to the complaint, puts the whole hearing up. Saves a lot of time searching through the old manual cassette tape to find where it was. Also saves us a lot of time in uploading that every day. All of the defaults for people who don't show have to be verbally placed on the record by the court. And then those need to also be uploaded to RITT. So the new system, we got, I believe, at a great cost, under 10,000, total. Okay, $700 split between 2 fiscal years. So that's a lot of return. We're now ADA compliant. The other thing, and I don't know if it's in the budget, but I'd like to request it, is that technically Court Administrator Bettis is not the clerk of the court. That is actually a council appointment. And we mentioned with Director Strom, and I don't know if this got mentioned, but I'll mention it. For consistency's sake, I'd like to have her appointed by the council at some point, either now or with the new council. I leave that to this council's sound discretion. As the clerk of the court at no extra cost, she'll do that for free. She's basically doing the duties now. But we don't have an official court. That hinders us in response to some of the APRA requests. We don't have a seal, we don't have a clerk. We've actually had some of our APRA requests rejected by the Secretary of State because she's technically not a clerk of the court, she's the court administrator. So I think that's a relatively easy fix. I just asked the council to consider that and consider appointing her the clerk of the court, but not asking for any additional monies for her to perform that. But it is necessary.
So I just want to be clear on that. She's performing the job as head clerk, but she's not the head clerk?
She's performing many clerical duties, but technically they don't fall under her job description. But she's been doing them for the last 3.5 to 4 years without major complaint. We're still not looking because we realize what the budget constraints are, but I'd like to have her appointed forthwith if possible. I leave that in your sound discretion. No extra monies for the fiscal year ahead.
Her title is court administrator?
That's correct.
Can I ask a question? Do you know how her salary compares to other cities and towns?
Yes, I do. It's pitiful. Give you an example. Liz can back me up. the Warwick, for counterpart of Warwick, makes how much more? $20,000 more. We routinely outperform the Warwick Court. They're the same size city, relatively speaking, same number of stops, same issues, and bring in far in excess revenues than they do. And much more streamlined operation. In fact, the chief judge of that court, who, a friend of mine, former fellow prosecutor, routinely comes to both myself and Liz for advice on how to streamline our court and do certain things. We're happy to provide that information, but you go line by line through that court's personnel and our personnel, there's no comparison in salaries. They're much higher.
Thank you. Councilwoman Jermaine?
Thank you, Vice President. Good evening.
Good evening, Councilwoman.
My question-
Microphone.
My question is concerning line item 52004. Departmental expenses. I see there is a tremendous increase, 25,000 more. It was budgeted for this year of 25,000 at 50,000. So I would love to have a little explanation and why there is such increase.
Big part of the increase I've already discussed. We thought we were gonna have buy-in from our partners in the police department on the new ticket system. So we had to purchase, it's a one-time purchase of different tickets. They're not all the same. Sure.
Wow, thank you. But question, why we have to outspend to give a ticket? What we can do?
Well, we don't. The short answer, we don't. We can continue.
That's just why give a ticket, we'll have to spend more money instead of getting anything. So can we figure out something? This is not
Well, I
helping.
think that's what,
The answer is we need to have more moving violations at some point, pick up, hopeful that that activity will pick up. So basically what the court administrator was saying is that at $96, the ticket was revenue neutral and somewhat not favor. At a parking ticket at $25, even if you max out and double at 75, it's not favor. And you add on the postage cost, so when you double and triple those tickets, because a lot of people don't come in until it reaches $75. They go, oh my God, I didn't get the ticket, whatever the excuse is, but that's 3 sets of mailings as opposed to, we had hand notice from officer to motorist on the moving violations. So we're not spending any money on moving violations. regarding notice to the motorist, as opposed to notice for parking tickets. Either, double or triple. And like I said, most times they don't come in under $25. They'll come in when they get the $50 notice or the $75 notice, but it's still costing us a great deal of money in postage, as well as the court administrator explained, the increased cost for paper tickets, because quite frankly, technology is not heading that way. And then we have the redundancies of having to pay additional man hours, again, to input 2 or 3 different times, as opposed to a one input, one and done system that goes into the DMV, and we just access the DMV from the system, and, we go from there. So we don't have a one-time, it's a one-time input, or 2 or 3 or 4 sometimes, for the same ticket.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Mazzulli?
Thank you. Chief Judge, just a question on the hospitalization line. So that up 10% to get the part-time employees are going to be a full-time employee, and we're estimating they're going to take a family plan. Is that where that increase would come from?
Actually, yes, in part.
Okay, and just one more question for Ms. Bett's position. The differential that she gets, is that, to my understanding, separate from the clerk duties, right? That was from other duties already?
That's correct.
Okay, what were those? Like, what job is it that she's being paid for, and then which one is she doing?
She's doing all of the jobs right now. She's doing clerical work, she's doing window service, she's doing Apple requests, which we get more than you would think. She's doing, I'll let her speak for, but she does just about everything, because we're down to one other full-time and the part-time interpreter, so. So I guess the short answer, Councilwoman, would be the new appointment would be more ministerial acts of stamping required requests. Then the stipend covers the other 2 items that she just discussed, both her court administrative duties and the clerical duties she performs.
I just wanted to make clear that it was 3 jobs and not 2. That she's, so, okay. And finally, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask now, but we did increase the amount of judges, which does, slightly increase the money that's going out. Do you feel as though you're getting a good return on that investment, or that we really do not need the extra judges and that money could be used elsewhere?
I'll preface my remarks by saying that I think that all of the appointments, all of the individuals who were appointed are outstanding people, and they all bring different legal backgrounds and legal experience to the court, and so we are appreciative of that. But, all honesty, do we need 9? We do not.
How many would you say we do need?
Presently, we have Judge Coyer and Judge Regasta also having sessions with us, so we give them something to do. That did not work out at the probate court. I'll let the probate personnel speak to as to why that didn't work out. In theory, it should have, but it did not. So we're carrying those two additional auxiliary judges. And I would think a good mix would be in the range of 4 to 5. And I hesitate to go any lower than that, only because the reality is you're dealing with fairly busy attorneys that have other commitments. And you know, life happens, right? We have vacations, we have family emergencies, all kinds of things that happen, you know, in any walk and shape of life. So we have that, so we do need to have enough to cover. I think 4 or 5 total would be sufficient to cover that with an auxiliary. I would agree with that assessment.
And that would save, what, am I doing the math, like $20,000 if we went down to maybe to 5 judges?
Right.
Okay, and this is just a question, I know you're not asking for it, but what would the additional differential be if we properly paid Ms. Bettis to do 3 jobs? To go to the clerk of court, I'm just curious.
I would honestly say another stipend of 5 to 7,500 would be fair. But I leave that to the council's sound discretion. We're not asking for it.
No, I
It's just a
know.
necessity that we need to have a court clerk for ministerial duties.
Understood. Thank you.
But just as an aside, there myself and Senior Judge Fort handle most of the housing and emergency alarms and things of that nature. Generally because we have the most experience in civil litigation type, for lack of a better term, with, you know, what comes first, the judgment, the citation, the execution, then the lien. All of that is very technical. You want to make sure we're going to put a lien on a property that's a bank loan property. You better have everything in order because they do all of that with fine tooth comb. They have attorneys, they have money. And so I would have to say we've been very successful at that. Because we do take our time, we do it right. So we handle most of myself and Judge Ford handle most of those issues, those cases.
Other questions? You have another question? We want to thank you for coming here. Elizabeth, we want to thank you for coming also. Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you do have a question? Oh, okay. Shoot. I didn't pull the trigger. Councilwoman Vargas, you have a question?
We just have about 2 or so. To Councilwoman Renzuli's point, absolutely, I had that very same question, and not to kind of keep sticking to that same subject as you pretty much have answered all of those questions already. Does that also account for like probate as well, when you were answering those questions?
Probate, as I understand it, is an issue of what was supposed to be delegated to the 2 judges that were going to sit as auxiliary judges. It was my understanding at the start of the term that they were going to be each given their own calendar from the head probate judge. Depending on which side you listen to, that probably did not happen. So they felt they were being underutilized in the probate court. So they then asked myself and court administrator if we could use them, give them something to do. Sit and actually have a calendar, and we have accommodated them because, in my opinion, both Judge Coyer and Judge Regasta were and are two of the more experienced judges we have in the system, and they also are available. Yeah, emergency or another judge can't show up, so we've taken advantage of that and given them a calendar fairly regularly, I would say. Yeah, so we do utilize the two of them. As to the exact nature of the problem, the probate court, I don't know. I'm just surmising. That's what I was told.
Okay, thank you for that. So, and it's the same probate judge, correct?
Right.
Koya? No, not Koya.
Help.
You. And so I guess kind of piggybacking again with on Councilwoman Renzoli's question in terms of the judges. So there's currently about 9, you had said, obviously that includes yourself, just auxiliary senior chief judge and yourself, chief judge. If there were, and I would have to double check on this because it's also based on ordinances, of course. But I was just curious if there were cuts on those positions, which I don't think we can touch base upon on this current council term, and I could be wrong, but it would be for the following fiscal year. Which I'm not even sure whether we could do or not, but just hypothetically, you're saying that you would be able to, or that court would be able to function with about 4 to 5?
I would say, I would stand with my court administrator's assessment of 5 total.
Including the chief judge, senior
Chief judge, senior judge, and 3 other associate judges, and perhaps 1 auxiliary, just in reserve, but I would leave that to your sound discretion. They get paid by stipend, they don't have a salary, so they're relatively efficient, cost efficient to use. We also, as I'm sitting here, and the general rule I have is like with Red Auerbach said, win it and get out, but I'm going to say something. We also offered to merge the courts, so to speak, and have the probate court function out of our court with our staff. I would save on added clerk that I think they're down anyway, or they're trying to replace in probate. Did not receive positive feedback on that. We have a beautiful courtroom now. In my opinion, there's no reason why they should not be operating out of that courtroom. We're not backlogged. We handled prior to the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, I believe when we were heading into the 4th quarter of fiscal year 19 and 20, we were right around $700,000 to $710,000 in on the budget. And in the last quarter, we were probably going to hit near $800,000 collected. And we had 5 judges. There is no backlog because if the court administrator needs me to come in, which I routinely do, I'm there almost every day. I will sign orders. I will get correspondence out that needs to be signed. I do what's necessary required for the orderly functioning of the court and the efficient functioning of the court, so that if there is a backlog during the day and certain tickets need to be dismissed, or there needs to be some discussion with the clerical staff or a decision on whether or not we're going to rescind a license or reinstate a license, and that happens on a daily basis. I'm generally the one that goes in and we'll discuss it and we'll make a determination. So there's no backlog of paperwork or cases. We remove them as soon as they come in. Court fee is $39.50 for course. However, we have leeway on the parking tickets per an ordinance that was adopted by the council, I think, 2 terms ago, where we could go anywhere from $20 up to the full $39.50 on parking tickets, correct? We have discretion. 20 to 39.
20 to 39, fully revenue towards the city, or is a portion of that have to go somewhere else to the state or?
The court course, as I understand, are a portion between the city and the state, correct? No? That's what I mean, traffic violations. The traffic and any city violations, we get it 100%. But not the moving, anything that's a state citation, 1 to 10, using the good driving statute, that fee is set by the state, and they get 100% of that fee. Or the court course, I'm sorry.
Just curious. Much that
It's
is.
a sliding scale for each of the violations. $85.
85 bucks.
Not on the moving violation would be $39.
Curious, and I'm not saying I'm increasing, decrease, or anything along those lines, but obviously, I would defer. By actual, and how, so I assume the answer, I have answer is, but I'm just curious as far as the impact. I'm thinking it depends on the person and everything else.
Yeah,
but
well,
I'm
it would
just
depend
curious.
on the amount of the increase, because those tickets tend to fall, in my opinion, on the less affluent in the city. So I take a very, I don't want to say a lenient approach, but I take a very cautious approach, because times are difficult, especially now. And I know that every dollar counts in a lot of the households. So sometimes, to my court administrator's consternation, I will dismiss the fine and just do the $20 court course or something along those lines. If they have a reasonable explanation, if they just throw me out something, you know, that's a different consideration, but correct, we're gonna scrap the 2 part-time positions that we've had difficulty, in our opinion, filling properly. It would be a union position. That's correct. In addition, to further offset the cost of that position, our present full-time clerk, Robin Kutcher, although she finished #1 on the test for the senior position, has agreed to forego that pay increase and not take the senior position and just stay at the entry level, for lack of a better term, clerk's position, which is a great act of generosity on her part, because she could take the higher position. She's number one on the test, she's in the union, she could grab it like that, but she also realizes the great need and the value to the board having an in-house Spanish-speaking full-time.
So, Your Honor, just so I am well aware, that union position will have exercise skills as well, and will the posting, because it is union position, not say Spanish preferred, but Spanish required? And will
Spanish
that be
required.
posted as well? And will that have any political input? And I'm not asking for myself. I'm just making sure it's an open and fair process to everyone.
Not if, I am fairly confident that that will not be political in any way, because Liz and I will constitute 2 out of the 3 members of the board that will interview. We have that promise. So, I mean, I don't have the ultimate hiring authority, but I would find it, I think would put the administration in a difficult position if somebody that's highly qualified, Latino, qualified for that position, including Ira, the present occupant, who I know will interview for that position also. If that person is recommended, I find it would not believe that that person would not be hired. My opinion. If that passes, we've already started drawing up the job specs for the administrative slash interpreter. And the requirement is a requirement. That's not a waivable requirement. As you indicate, person speak.
That'll be
Spanish.
savings. You're saying this position will be of savings to the,
I know it'll be savings because
even after like the whole
after you add in the
hospitalization and
benefits,
everything, all the
because
benefits and everything else?
we are saving money with an in-house interpreter, because I don't have to, Liz doesn't have to chase after a Spanish interpreter for every one of our sessions. There are at least 3 or 4 constituents that require Spanish-speaking services. Again, depending on how much notice we have, that person is going to require it. Sometimes it's that morning and we're scrambling. And I don't like to have people that have taken the time out of their day, whether it's their job or their family, and have them reappear simply because we're not prepared to deal with the fact that they speak the Spanish language. So my preference is when they're there, let's get it heard. Should be no difference, in my opinion. And that's costly. That's $300 to $500 every time. We have 2 or 3 of them. And again, that's not including phone calls that I handle every day and window service that's handled every day at a very good clip. I would say close to 50%, 45%.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. Absolutely, 100%, just because I've had to look into that, especially depending on the time of day as well, whether it's evening or not, or weekends, which is a little different, but thank you.
We
Right, they have to
tried
be part of the NAJIT, Certified National Judicial Interpreters, Judicials. Yeah, I am familiar with
They
it,
got a
but
little certificate, but we have tried also, as Liz alluded, Court Administrator Bettis alluded to try to get our online server to offer instructions in Spanish. To me, it wouldn't seem to be that complicated, but for some reason we can't seem to get that accomplished.
thank you so much.
Real quick, promise. Let's time me.
Councilwoman Marino.
Thank you. Thank you this evening, Honorable Smith. And to the point of the interpreter, I can attest to that, doing what I do. There's a minimum set of hours. You're talking, when you had said before 300, that's actually on the low end because of the travel time they include too. And then just the translation services for letters and things like that. So to have someone on premises in that capacity would be a big savings, yeah. And it would be, just a good faith effort towards the constituency and general public. So thank you.
It makes fiscal sense and it makes good community relations sense, and it gives everybody that comes to the court, whether you speak English or Spanish, a sense of fairness and equality that I think is absolutely required, especially in a court. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having us. Good to see everybody.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?